Imagine a journey, yeah, across open plains, towering mountains. But it's not just about the motorcycle ride. It's a journey deep into, well, what makes things work? What makes life really feel fulfilling?
Exactly. And today we're doing a real deep dive into a book that, honestly, it challenges so much of how we think. Robert Pirsig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
It's such a unique book.
It really is. It's way more than just, a travel story or some kind of manual about fixing bikes. It's this philosophical quest, brilliantly woven into a cross-country motorcycle trip. And it really pushes us to look at how we see the world, how we deal with challenges, and ultimately how we find that deep value, what Pirsig famously calls quality, in pretty much everything we do.
Yeah, finding meaning in the details, right?
That's a great way to put it.
So our mission today is really to unpack the most powerful ideas from this amazing intellectual journey. We want to make these complex thoughts easier to get your head around, fun to explore, and crucially, really practical, something you can actually use in your day-to-day life. So kicking off, what really jumps out at you about this? A seemingly simple motorcycle trip that somehow becomes this huge exploration of mind, meaning, and this thing called quality. Okay, let's maybe start with the journey itself, because the way they travel in Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance, it's not just about getting somewhere, it's kind of a philosophical choice, isn't it?
Absolutely. The narrator really spends time emphasizing how different riding a motorcycle is compared to being sealed up in a car.
Yeah, I love that quote he has. You're in the scene, not just watching it anymore, and the sense of presence is overwhelming. You really feel that, don't you?
You do. In a car, you're like, you're behind glass, watching the world go by like a movie. But on a bike, that road is right there, just inches away. You feel the wind, you smell the air, the pines, the rain, everything. It's this immediate, raw connection to reality.
Completely exposed, in a way.
Exposed, yeah, and engaged. You can't just zone out. It forces this unfiltered presence.
And that sort of physical immediacy, that direct connection, it really sets the scene for the intellectual journey too, doesn't it?
It totally does. And it's not a rushed trip either.
Yeah.
His choice, the narrator's choice, to stick to secondary roads. That's not just about seeing more cows,
Right.
It's a deliberate decision about valuing good over time. That's a huge distinction right at the start, signaling the book's core themes. When you stop focusing just on speed and efficiency and start thinking about the quality of the experience, well, your whole approach changes. Not just to the trip, but maybe to life.
Seeking out the richer path, even if it's slower.
Exactly. The path that lets you observe more, interact more deeply.
And that focus on good quality instead of just time is what creates the room for what he calls the chautauqua, which is kind of an old-fashioned idea, right?
Yeah, he frames it as reviving this tradition of popular talks meant to edify and entertain, improve the mind, and bring culture and enlightenment. So as they're riding, he uses these mental talks, these chautauquas, to dig into what he sees as these silted-in ways of thinking.
Like channels of thought that have gotten clogged up.
Precisely. He's challenging society's focus on what's new instead of asking what is best. He worries that the fast pace, all the media bombardment, it makes our stream of national consciousness wider, maybe, but also run less deep.
So the chautauqua is his way of pushing back against that shallowness.
Yeah, it's a deliberate attempt to encourage a deeper kind of inquiry into life's big questions. It really highlights this core argument that deeper engagement, whether it's with the road or ideas or just how things work, is absolutely vital for real understanding.
And it's in that context, that spirit of deep inquiry, that he brings up this conflict that seems minor at first, but he says it runs way, way deep.
The motorcycle maintenance thing.
Exactly. This difference between him and his friends, John and Sylvia. The narrator thinks it's totally natural and normal to use the toolkit, follow the instructions, keep his bike running well himself.
While John and Sylvia, they just want to hand it off. Rely on competent mechanics.
Yeah.
They want to get their hands dirty, literally or figuratively.
And their reactions are quite strong, aren't they? It's not just, oh, I prefer not to. It's almost like distaste.
It really is. When the narrator starts talking about fixing things, John's eyes just go completely glassy, and Sylvie calls it a whole other thing, like garbage. They just shut down. They want the working bike, but zero involvement in the process.
It really shows a fundamental discomfort with the mechanics of it all.
It points to a really deep difference in how they relate to the world, this philosophical split the book keeps exploring. Think about that story with John's bike not starting.
Oh, yeah, the cold start incident.
Right. John gets super frustrated. He's got the manual right there. But he keeps trying full choke. Even though, as the narrator points out, it's a hot day, and the manual clearly says full choke is for cold starts.
He can't connect the instruction to the reality?
Exactly. He's stuck in this rigid black box thinking. Just follow the rule, don't understand the principle, and it just leads to more frustration. The narrator wisely holds back, though. He sees that until he had a real felt need, he was just going to resent help. John had to hit rock bottom with it first.
That is so relatable. How often do we do that or see people do that? Just avoid the details, expect things to work like magic, and then get mad when they don't.
Your phone, your computer, your car.
Yeah. Do we really get how they work, or do we just want the smooth surface? And what happens when we push away help or information because we haven't hit that point of real felt need, that moment of frustration that finally makes us willing to learn?
It's such a common thing. And Pirsig uses it perfectly to set up these bigger ideas about how we approach problems, how we engage or fail to engage with reality. Sometimes the biggest block isn't the problem. It's our own resistance to actually seeing it. And this resistance, this difference in approach, leads us straight into one of the book's absolute core ideas, this split between classic and romantic understanding.
Right, and he defines these not just as abstract ideas, but through the characters, how they actually live and behave.
Exactly. It's lived philosophy. So on one side, you have the romantic understanding. This is all about the immediate appearance, the direct experience, the feeling, the intuition. It sees the world as sort of a surface of beauty and emotion.
Like the beauty of the motorcycle itself, the thrill of the ride, the wind.
Precisely. And John and Sylvia are the perfect examples. For them, digging into the engine, the maintenance, it's not just boring. It's actively dull, awkward, and ugly. It feels like a death force that kills the joy, the pure experience. They want that emotional connection, not the nuts and bolts.
Okay, so that's the romantic side. Then the other is
classic understanding. This is the narrator's territory, and especially the territory of Phaedrus, his sort of intellectual alter ego from the past. Classic understanding is focused on the underlying form, the structure, the logic, the analysis, breaking things down into parts, figuring out how they relate, how and why they work.
the hidden structure beneath the surface.
Exactly. And from this classic view, the romantics can seem, well, frivolous, irrational, erratic, untrustworthy, all surface, no substance. Pirsig calls this a dimensional difference, and he argues it's not just personality. He thinks it was underneath a lot of the cultural shifts in the 60s, that rejection of technology and cold rationality.
And it's still with us today, this split.
Absolutely. It's this deep divide that makes it seem like reason and feeling, technology and art are totally incompatible, which, spoiler alert, Pirsig argues they don't have to be. But the split creates this alienation, this disconnect.
And the narrator is constantly trying to bridge that gap, right? Especially with John, trying to explain the machine.
Yeah, and he describes it as just hopeless. He says all he heard was noise, and all he saw was the machine and me with greasy tools in my hands, nothing else. John, Pirsig notes, is not so interested in what things mean as in what they are. He wants the bike to be beautiful, be freedom, not to mean a system of concepts.
That's a crucial difference, what it is versus what it means.
Huge.
Yeah.
And it's central to the Chautauqua, because that's the gap Pirsig is trying to close.
There's that great little story that shows this clash perfectly, the loose handlebars on John's BMW.
Oh yeah, that's brilliant. The narrator, thinking classically, pragmatically, suggests a fix. Use a shim, cut from a beer can to tighten the handlebars. It's practical, effective, uses what's available. A high-quality solution in his view.
Elegant, even.
Right. But John, he's totally offended. The idea of using a piece of old beer can on his fancy, expensive BMW, it's an insult to the bike's image. It's prestige.
The appearance, the romantic value, trumps the function for him.
Completely. The shim is ugly, mundane. It violates his romantic sense of the bike's value. It just perfectly shows how these different ways of seeing classic focus on function and integrity, romantic focus on aesthetics and symbolism, lead to completely different judgments about what's good or quality.
Wow. That really makes you think, doesn't it? Where do you see that split in your own life? Like how you deal with your car or your phone? Are you just about the shiny surface, or do you care about what's underneath?
Or even a project you're working on. Are you all about the initial inspiration, the feeling? Or do you get into the structure, the technique?
Yeah. Are you focused on the surface or the underlying form? And how does that affect how you solve problems or even just appreciate things? Pirsig says this split is everywhere if you look. Understanding it is the first step, maybe, to putting things back together.
So if we have these two apparently opposing ways of seeing romantic surface and classic structure, how do you even begin to connect them? This brings us right to the heart of the book, doesn't it? The concept of quality.
Yeah, the big one. Quality, with a capital Q, often. And the narrator wrestles with it right away. He says it's something everyone knows what it is, yet you don't know what it is.
It's maddeningly slippery when you try to define it right. But we know it exists. Think about grades in school. An A is just better than a C somehow, or why one painting is priceless and another is worthless. There's this sense of betterness, of value.
But pin it down. Objectively. Almost impossible.
Exactly. And this is where Phaedrus, the narrator's intense former self, really dives in. He was teaching rhetoric, trying to get students to write well, to produce good writing, and he hit a wall. There was that student who couldn't write about anything, not even the town they were in, Bozeman.
Right. She was totally blocked.
Until Phaedrus gave her that almost absurdly specific instruction. Narrow it down to the main street of Bozeman. Still nothing. Then, write about a single brick on that street.
And that worked.
It unlocks something. Pirsig argues that this extreme focus forces original and direct seeing. It makes you strip away all the labels, the preconceptions, the intellectual stuff, and just see what is right there in its raw state. Direct apprehension.
Getting past the mental clutter.
Right. And this leads Phaedrus to challenge that fundamental tool of Western thought, what he calls the knife of analysis, the one that cuts reality into subject, the observer, and object, the observed. He realizes quality is somehow beyond both.
That's a pretty radical idea. It's not just in the object.
If it were purely objective, science could measure it. You could build a quality meter. But we can't measure goodness.
And it's not just subjective, just in our heads.
If it were purely subjective, then everyone's opinion would be equally valid. My good would be the same as your good. But clearly, we make distinctions. A well-built bridge is different from one that falls down. A masterpiece is different from a doodle. Quality seems to exist between or before subject and object.
Okay, so where does it exist then?
This is the big leap. Phaedrus has this revelation, this son of quality idea. He thinks the son of quality has created them subject and object. They are subordinate to it.
Whoa. So quality comes first.
That's the revolutionary idea. Instead of quality being a judgment we make about things that already exist, Pirsig argues quality is the primary reality. It's the fundamental force, the continuing stimulus which causes us to create the world in which we live.
So quality isn't just a characteristic of things, it's what makes them meaningful, what drives us to even perceive them and create them in the first place.
Exactly. It's the pre-intellectual reality, that immediate flash of recognition, that aha moment you get before you start analyzing or labeling. It's the direct experience of value itself.
Wow, okay. That completely flips things around. Quality isn't something we just add or judge. It's the source. We don't just find it, we kind of participate in.
We recognize its presence, yeah.
So think about something you're really good at, or something you just deeply appreciate. Maybe it's music, or cooking, or coding, or even just a conversation that flows perfectly.
Yeah.
Can you define its goodness in purely objective terms?
Probably not entirely.
Or is there that quality, that spark that makes it work, that makes it resonate? How can we get better at that original and direct seeing? How can we tune into that quality more in our own lives, in our work? It's about looking for that deeper goodness that comes before all the labels.
And trusting that feeling, maybe?
Yeah, trusting that immediate sense of, yes, this is it.
So building on this idea of quality as fundamental, the book then takes aim at our whole system of rational thought, how we actually think about things.
Right. He uses the motorcycle again. He says it's not just steel and rubber, it's fundamentally a system of concepts worked out in steel. All the parts, the way they connect, the principles of combustion, they're all ideas made physical.
Even the basic materials like steel, or abstract ideas like potential energy in a battery, you can't directly sense steelness or potential. He calls them ghosts. They're mental constructs, part of our conceptual toolkit that we use to make sense of the raw data hitting our senses.
So the physical world and our mental map of it are completely tangled up.
Inextricably. And digging into this, Phaedrus makes this really startling claim. He thinks the root cause of a lot of modern problems the alienation people feel isn't just external stuff. It's a genetic defect within the nature of reason itself.
A defect in rationality, wow.
Yeah. He argues that our dominant way of thinking, the way we're mostly taught, has become emotionally hollow, aesthetically meaningless, and spiritually empty. It's too focused on the objective, the measurable, and it cuts us off from the qualitative, the value-driven aspects of experience. That's why we can have all this progress and still feel empty.
That connects to what he sees as a paradox in science, right?
Exactly. The scientific method aims for a single objective truth. But what often happens, by gathering more facts, creating more hypotheses, looking ever closer, you don't always get one simple answer. You get multiple indeterminate relative ones.
The more you look, the more you see.
Right. And sometimes you see so much it becomes overwhelming, fragmented. That's why he felt the stream of national consciousness runs less deep. We're bombarded with information, often conflicting, making it hard to find stable ground. The danger, he warns, is this scientifically produced anti-science chaos. Our tool for understanding, pushed too far or used wrongly, can end up creating confusion.
So he starts digging into the history of this, the philosophical roots.
He does. He goes back to David Hume, the empiricist. Hume basically said, look, if all we know comes from our senses, what about substance? You sense hardness, coldness, shininess in the motorcycle frame, but do you sense the underlying metalness itself?
No, you just sense the properties.
Right. Hume argued that substance is something we just infer or imagine to connect those properties.
Yeah.
Which leaves a big hole in how we think reality holds together.
Okay, so Hume points out the problem.
Then comes Immanuel Kant with this incredibly influential solution. Kant said, okay, maybe the mind isn't just a blank slate receiving sense data. Maybe the mind itself supplies certain fundamental structures, a priori concepts, to organize that data.
Like built-in software.
Kind of. Things like time, space, causality, substance. They aren't the raw data. They're the framework our mind uses to make sense of the data. So we don't just passively receive reality, our minds actively structure it. That a priori motorcycle in our head is constantly being updated but feels continuous because our mind imposes that structure.
Okay, so Kant gives the mind a more active role.
Definitely. Then Pirsig brings in Henri Poincaré, the French mathematician and physicist. Poincaré took it even further. He suggested that even scientific and mathematical truths aren't absolute discoveries, but more like convenient or advantageous conventions we choose because they work well for organizing things.
So like useful tools, not ultimate truths.
Pretty much. And Poincaré noticed that scientists often choose which facts to focus on, which theories to pursue, based on a kind of intuition, a subliminal self, guided by mathematical beauty or harmony. He called this classic beauty, not just pretty looks, but the elegance and order in the underlying structure.
The beauty of a good theory.
Exactly. And this is where Phaedrus makes the crucial connection. Poincaré saw the beauty, but didn't quite say why it guides us, Phaedrus says. It's not just subjective taste, that intuitive selection, that sense of harmony. It's guided by quality.
Ah, quality comes back in.
Yes, because quality is reality. It's the fundamental force guiding our perception and creation. So when scientists are drawn to elegant theories, they're actually responding to the underlying quality of reality itself. This solves the problem of just having convenient fictions or endless relative truths. Quality provides the compass.
Okay, that's a lot to chew on. So when you encounter something presented as a hard fact or a fixed rule, maybe pause and think about where it came from. Is it really absolute? Or is it a useful convention, maybe shaped by a sense of quality or beauty?
Right. And how might sticking too rigidly to just the rational, without acknowledging quality, actually limit how we see things? How it might block us from finding better solutions personally or even as a society. It's about questioning the frame, not just the picture.
Okay, so we've gone pretty deep into the philosophy, quality, reason, perception. Now let's get back to the very practical side of things, something everyone experiences, getting totally stuck.
Oh yeah, that feeling when you're trying to fix something or solve a problem, write something, whatever it is, and you just hit a brick wall, it's miserable.
He describes it so well. You're losing time. You're incompetent. You should be ashamed of yourself. That whole negative spiral. He calls it the fear-anger syndrome.
And it makes you want to just give up, or worse, get destructive, like wanting to hammer on that side plate with a chisel. We've all been there.
Totally. But his insight into why we get stuck is really interesting. He blames that rigid objectivity, again, that split between subject and object.
Right. When you see yourself as separate from the thing you're working on, the object, you lose that intimate connection, that craftsman-like feeling for the work. You're just manipulating something external instead of being engaged with it. Stuckness happens, he thinks, when that connection is broken. The answer isn't just more analysis, it's reconnecting with quality, which exists before that split.
And here's the really wild part. He says being profoundly stuck might actually be better than having your head full of old ideas.
It's totally counterintuitive, isn't it?
Okay.
But he sees stuckness not as failure, but as the psychic predecessor of all real understanding. It's like the darkness before the dawn. It forces you to let go of what's not working and become open to something genuinely new.
A gateway to quality.
Exactly. He says, egoless acceptance of stuckness is a key to an understanding of all quality. Don't fight it, don't fear it, because the longer you stay stuck, the more you see the quality reality that gets you unstuck every time. The solution isn't usually hidden in your existing toolkit. It's out in front of the train, waiting for you to perceive it directly.
So next time you're banging your head against a wall on some task or problem, instead of panicking, maybe just sit with it. Embrace the stuckness. See what it reveals if you just observe without judgment.
Let the problem teach you. Yeah, it's a different mindset.
And to navigate this, he introduces another great concept, gumption.
Gumption. Love that word. It's that reservoir of good spirits, right? Your enthusiasm, your energy, your drive to keep going.
And gumption traps are anything that drains that reservoir, makes you lose sight of quality. He breaks them down into two types, things that happen to you and things that happen inside you.
So the external ones, the setbacks, like out-of-sequence reassembly. You take something apart, oops, how does it go back together? His fix is simple but brilliant. Lay parts out neatly, in order, maybe take photos, and he makes this great point. If you learn this the hard way, by messing up and figuring it out, you gain a deeper understanding, good feelings about it, that a specialist just following a manual might miss. You're way ahead after that kind of real learning.
Then there's intermittent failure, the most annoying problem ever. It only happens when you're not trying to fix it.
Yes. His advice? Patience. Carry your tools. Wait for it to happen again so you can actually see it. You, the owner living with it, are actually better placed to solve it than a mechanic who only sees it for an hour.
Okay, those are external. But he says the internal hang-ups are way more dangerous.
By far the largest and most dangerous group, yeah. Because we create them ourselves. First up, value rigidity. Being unable to reevaluate things because you're stuck on old values.
He uses that monkey trap analogy, right?
Yeah. The South Indian monkey trap, yeah. Monkey grabs rice in a jar. Fist is too big to get out with the rice, but it won't let go of the rice. Its value, even to save itself. We do that too, right? Cling to ideas, ego, comfort zones, even when they're trapping us.
Definitely. Then there's ego, thinking you know it all.
Which makes you blind to new facts, cuts you off from quality. As he says pretty bluntly, there's no way to bullshit your way into looking good on a mechanical repair job. The machine doesn't care how smart you think you are.
Humility, it's key.
Essential. Even if the work itself forces it on you. Then, boredom, which he sees as a big red flag, you're off the quality track.
His advice is simple. When you're bored, stop.
Right. Take a break, walk away, do anything else. Avoid making the big mistake that happens when your gumption is totally flatlined. He even suggests turning routine chores, like cleaning parts, into a kind of a ritual to find the quality in them and rebuild gumption.
He also mentions practical things like inadequate tools or bad surroundings, using a worn-out screwdriver, working in bad light. It just drains you.
Yeah, simple stuff, but respecting the work enough to have decent tools and light makes a huge difference to your gumption levels.
And finally, this really cool idea, moo.
Moo. The Japanese no thing is that third option beyond just yes or no. It means unask the question or the context is wrong, like a computer circuit with the power off. It's not 1 or 0, it just is.
It allows for ambiguity, for stepping outside the box.
Totally.
Yeah.
It breaks you out of rigid binary thinking, which connects beautifully to mechanics' feel. That's not just skill, it's an intuitive grasp, an understanding for the elasticity of metal, its softness, knowing just how much force to use. It's a direct, almost empathetic connection, beyond simple logic.
So, thinking about all these traps, which ones do you fall into? Value rigidity, ego, boredom. How can you use his advice? Patience, observation, humility, stepping back in your own stuff. And how could thinking moo help when you're faced with a tricky situation that doesn't have a simple yes-no answer?
Lots to apply there for sure. And all this focus on quality, gumption, overcoming stuckness. It leads him to this really powerful argument about healing the split between art and technology.
Yeah, that feels so relevant today. That feeling that technology is somehow separate from, or even hostile to, art and human values.
Right. But he points out the root word of technology, techne in Greek, originally meant art or craftsmanship. The ancient Greeks didn't see this huge divide we've created.
So where did the ugliness come from? The feeling that technology is sometimes cold or dehumanizing?
Pirsig argues it's not in the objects themselves or even the people. It's in the relationship between the people who produce the technology and the things they produce. And by extension, the relationship we, as users, have with it. When quality is missing from that relationship, when there's that disconnect.
We feel no identity with it. It just becomes a tool.
Exactly. No sense of connection, no soul. And that's where the ugliness, the alienation comes from. It's a breakdown in the relationship driven by a lack of quality awareness.
And to fix that relationship, to bring quality back in, he comes back to peace of mind.
He really hammers this point home. Peace of mind isn't at all superficial to technical work. It's the whole thing. It's not a bonus. It's the foundation. It's the state you need to be in to even perceive quality, that thing that bridges the classic and romantic.
It allows quality to emerge, basically.
Yes. And he describes this state as being unself-conscious, leading to complete identification with one's circumstances. You lose yourself in the work. That subject-object split dissolves.
And he breaks down the quietness needed for this into 3 levels.
Yeah, which get progressively harder. First, physical quietness, just relaxing your body. Seems simple, but can go deep. Second, mental quietness, calming the noisy thoughts, the internal chatter. Harder.
Definitely harder.
And the hardest, value quietness, acting without wandering desires, without ego getting in the way, without being attached to the outcome, just doing the work for its own sake, guided by quality. Pure engagement.
Wow, that sounds almost Zen-like.
It is. But the encouraging part is, he says you don't need to become a hermit to cultivate it. You can start small. A cup of coffee, a walk around the block, sometimes just putting off the job for 5 minutes of silence.
Little pauses to reset and find that quiet space.
Exactly. Those small acts help you grow towards that inner calm. He sees it in skilled craftspeople that patience, care, attentiveness, it comes from an inner peace of mind. A harmony with the work in which there's no leader and no follower. They're one with the task.
It flows through them, like that Korean wall analogy he used.
That's such a beautiful image. The wall built without mortar, just perfectly fitted stones. He says, quality work like that is a material reflection of a spiritual reality. The excellence you see in the object reflects the inner state, the peace, the care, the quality focus of the maker.
So the inner and outer are totally linked. Every act of creation can be, well, spiritual in a way.
That's the implication. So how can you bring more of that peace of mind, that unself-consciousness, into your own tasks, even the boring ones?
Yeah.
Can you see how the care you put in changes the quality of the outcome, but also your own experience?
Yeah. Shifting focus from just getting it done to the relationship you have with the work itself. How might that change things for you? It's about making even mundane stuff an act of creation, finding the quality in the process. #7, resolution and the continuing journey.
So as the motorcycle trip itself starts winding down, Pirsig brings the narrator's internal journey to a kind of resolution too, doesn't he?
He does, and it's really about integrating Phaedrus. That intense, brilliant, insane former self who was creatively on fire with a set of ideas no one had ever heard of before. The whole trip has been this slow, often painful process for the narrator of untangling these ideas, facing the past trauma, and bringing Phaedrus's insights into his present self.
Healing that internal split.
Exactly, a journey of synthesis and healing. And you see this reflected so powerfully in his son, Chris. Yeah, Chris's journey is fascinating. He starts out so troubled, fearful, angry, that feeling of not really going anywhere. And he's often literally looking at his dad's back on the bike.
Unable to see the bigger picture. He's like a mirror for the narrator's own unintegrated parts reacting to them.
But he changes, doesn't he? There's that moment near the end where he stands up on the foot pegs.
Yeah, seeing over your shoulders, getting a new perspective, literally and figuratively. He's starting to engage to see more.
And then that really moving question, can I have a motorcycle when I get old enough?
It's loaded with hope. And the narrator's answer is just perfect. It's not just yes or no. It's if you take care of it, not if you have the right attitudes.
It's about the relationship again, not just having the thing, but having the right engagement, the quality mindset.
Exactly. It's like the lessons of quality are being passed down. A legacy of understanding hard-won through the journey.
And this leads to that final realization, doesn't it? That the journey doesn't really end.
Right. The narrator understands trials never end, of course. Unhappiness and misfortune are bound to occur. But there is a feeling now. We've run it. It's going to get better now. It's not about reaching some perfect endpoint where problems vanish.
It's about the quality of the journey itself.
Precisely. It's about embracing the continuous process of becoming, learning, integrating, finding the here in every moment. Resolution isn't an end. It's the ongoing ability to engage with quality wherever you are.
That's such a different way to think about goals and progress. How does that resonate with you in your own life? your work, your learning? What quality are you really aiming for?
And what happens if you shift your focus from just hitting the target, arriving, to truly appreciating the traveling, the process, the challenges, the stuckness, the learning, seeing that as the real measure of quality?
Food for thought, definitely. Hashtag tag tag outro.
So wrapping up this deep dive into Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance, what are the big takeaways?
I think it shows us that chasing quality isn't just about fixing things better. It's about fundamentally understanding reality, finding real purpose in what we do, and cultivating this inner harmony.
Yeah, it's about merging those seemingly separate worlds, the classic and the romantic, reason and feeling, art and technology into one unified way of seeing and appreciating goodness.
We've looked at how understanding that classic romantic split, learning to embrace stuckness as an opportunity, watching out for those gumption traps, and really prioritizing peace of mind. How all that can genuinely change how we interact with the world.
It really is a kind of roadmap for living with more engagement, more intention.
And that final challenging idea, Pirsig suggests the real system isn't out there, it's our present construction of systematic thought itself, rationality itself. If we want to change things, maybe the deepest change starts with how we think, especially how we recognize and value quality.
It's about upgrading our own mental software.
That's a good way to put it. So the final thought we want to leave you with is this. What ghosts of old ideas, what rigid thinking patterns might be holding you back from connecting more deeply with the quality that's inherent in your life, your work, your relationships? What's one thing, maybe even something small, that you could dig into more deeply, not just to understand what it is, but to truly experience its quality and find that sense of peace that comes with genuine connection?
Keep exploring, keep questioning.
And keep riding that road. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.